So you're really intrigued by this whole personal responsibility thing, huh? How it can, like, unlock peak performance and all that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
We've been diving deep into Bryant Tracy's work, and let me tell you, there's this one aha moment he had that really kind of kickstarted his whole
Now
philosophy.
tell me about it.
Okay, so picture this. He's 21, freezing his butt off in this, like, rundown apartment,
If I've been there.
and it hits him. No one is coming to rescue him.
Wow.
This realization, as he describes it, it was like terrifying and liberating all at the same time.
Yeah, I could see that. Those moments can really shake you up. What's fascinating to me is how an experience like that, as bleak as it sounds, can become a catalyst for something so powerful. Like in Tracy's case, this deep dive into personal responsibility.
Right, it's like that wake-up call you need sometimes.
Totally. He realized in that moment, if he wanted to change his life, he had to, stop waiting for someone else to do it for him.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, though, isn't it? Waiting for someone to come along and fix everything.
It's definitely tempting,
Yeah.
but it's that realization that no one's coming that can really light a fire under you.
It's like he stumbled into that valley of excuses. He talks about that place where you're surrounded by all the reasons why you can't change and realized he needed to climb out, like yesterday.
Exactly.
And it completely changed his perspective. Suddenly, he's not this passive bystander in his own life anymore. He starts seeing himself as the architect, the one responsible for designing and building the life he wants.
It's a powerful metaphor, right? You become the architect of your own destiny.
I love that. Instead of just inheriting some pre-designed life, you get to make changes, renovate, create something totally unique.
Puts you in the driver's seat.
Totally. But to do that effectively, Tracy argues you need a solid foundation of, like, two main things: self-esteem and responsibility.
He's very clear about that.
Okay, so self-esteem makes sense. When you believe in yourself, you're more likely to take risks, go after what you want. But then there's responsibility. Is he saying we're, like, responsible for everything that happens to us? That seems pretty intense.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It's a common misconception, but it's not quite what Tracy's getting at. He uses this really interesting analogy of a chasm between childhood and adulthood.
Okay, break that down for me. What's this chasm all about?
So imagine it as this symbolic divide. On one side, you've got childhood. Think about it. When you're a kid, you're pretty dependent on others, right?
Totally. Your parents, teachers, they make most of the decisions, provide for you, protect you from the world. You don't have a ton of responsibility for how your life unfolds.
Exactly. It's like you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
But then you reach a certain age where you're expected to cross over this chasm to the other side, adulthood. And that's where true responsibility kicks in.
And that jump, that transition, that can be pretty daunting, like stepping off a cliff, not knowing what awaits you at the bottom.
And you know what? A lot of people, they get stuck on that cliff edge. They're afraid to let go of that childhood dependence.
So they stay in jobs they hate, relationships that aren't working, because it feels safer than facing that fear of full-on responsibility.
It's easier to stay in the comfort of the familiar, even if it's not really serving you.
And that's how they end up in that valley of excuses. This whole valley of excuses thing, it's quite the image, isn't it?
Yeah, it really paints a picture, doesn't it? It's like
Right.
a comfortable trap.
Totally. It's like you get lulled into this sense of security by all these convenient excuses.
Exactly. The economy's bad. It's my parents' fault. I don't have the time. All these reasons why you can't possibly be expected to change.
Oh, I know those excuses all too well. It's like a broken record sometimes.
Right.
Uh.
But the thing is, those excuses, they're just a way to avoid taking ownership of our lives. It's easier to blame external factors than to look inwards and do the hard work of making a change.
It's that whole "it's not my fault" mentality.
Exactly. And it can be so insidious because it keeps us stuck in this cycle of blame and inaction.
It's like that Tolstoy story Tracy talks about, right? With the box and the white rabbit.
Oh yeah, the one where the box holds all the answers to life's problems, but you can only open it if you don't think about a white rabbit.
And of course, it's impossible not to think about the white rabbit.
Right. It's this brilliant analogy because it highlights how these distractions, these white rabbits in our minds, they keep us from finding real solutions.
It's like they block our path to the good stuff.
They totally do.
Yeah.
And the key is recognizing that we all have our own white rabbits, those personal excuses, those ingrained beliefs that hold us back.
So to climb out of that valley of excuses, we need to figure out what our personal white rabbit is. What's that thing we keep telling ourselves that's preventing us from stepping into our power?
Exactly. It's about becoming aware of those self-imposed limitations. and challenging their validity. Because here's the thing, responsibility, it's not optional. It's not like a buffet where you can pick and choose which areas of life you want to be responsible for.
So you're saying we can't just cherry pick the areas where we're willing to step up and own our choices.
Exactly. Tracy's very clear on this point. Once you reach adulthood, you're 100% responsible for your life, the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Whoa, okay.
Mm.
100%. That's a big one to swallow. I mean, doesn't that feel kind of overwhelming? Like, if everything is on me, what if I screw up? What if I make the wrong choices?
Oh, I totally get that. Those fears are completely understandable, but I think they stem from a misunderstanding of what responsibility really means. See, Tracy, he breaks
Right.
it down
Yeah.
beautifully. Responsibility.
Responsibility. Okay, I like that. Break it down for me.
It's not about carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's about recognizing your power to choose your response to any situation.
So it's less about blame and more about empowerment.
Exactly. It's about shifting from feeling like a victim of circumstance to becoming the conscious creator of your own life.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's not that everything is our fault, but we always have a choice in how we respond to it.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Even if we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control how we react, how we let it affect us.
Now you're getting it. It's about recognizing that power that lies within each of us.
That's really empowering when you think about it.
It really is.
But it's interesting. Tracy doesn't just talk about personal responsibility in this individual sense. He connects it to the bigger picture, to society as a whole, right? He talks about how this lack of personal responsibility, it's not just a personal problem, it's a societal one.
Absolutely. He argues that it has some serious consequences on a larger scale.
Like in politics, the justice system, healthcare, those were some pretty big examples he gave.
And they're all connected to this idea of people relinquishing personal responsibility and looking for someone else to blame or to fix things.
So give me a concrete example. Like with politics, how does that play out?
Well, he observes this tendency for people to look to the government as the solution for all their problems. Instead of taking responsibility for their own lives and communities, they expect the government to act as a sort of parental figure, providing for their every need.
So instead of being active citizens, taking ownership of their communities, they're stuck in that childhood mindset looking for someone else to take care of everything.
Exactly. And Tracy argues that this creates this unhealthy dependence on the government and ultimately weakens a society's ability to thrive. Now, imagine that same dynamic playing out in the justice system.
You're talking about criminals refusing to take responsibility for their actions, right?
Yes. He talks about how it's much easier to blame your upbringing, your environment, society, anything but yourself, than to own up to your mistakes and do the hard work of rehabilitation.
So they're trapped in that valley of excuses, but on a societal level.
Precisely. Blaming external factors instead of looking inwards and taking responsibility for their choices.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about healthcare? How does that fit into all of this?
It's actually incredibly relevant, especially today. He talks about how people often neglect their own health, expecting doctors in the healthcare system to fix problems that could have been prevented with better lifestyle choices.
So instead of being active participants in their own well-being, they become passive recipients of healthcare, not taking ownership of their health until there's a problem that needs fixing.
Exactly. And that lack of proactive responsibility, as Tracy sees it, puts a strain on the entire healthcare system. It's about recognizing that your individual choices, they have ripple effects.
It all comes back to that architect metaphor, doesn't it? You're not just designing your own life, you're influencing the design of society as a whole.
And that's a lot of power.
It is, but it
Yeah.
also comes with a lot of responsibility, right?
For sure. But it's within that space of personal responsibility that Tracy drops one of his most empowering statements. You are free to choose.
That is a powerful statement. There's so much freedom in those words, but also a huge weight of responsibility,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It's a reminder that we have agency, we have a choice in every area of our lives.
We decide how we think, how we feel, and ultimately, those choices, they shape our lives.
And it's not about being perfect, or never messing up. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to those curveballs life throws our way.
Do we retreat into that valley of excuses, or do we step up and own our ability to respond?
Does remember Tracy's own story, that aha moment in that freezing apartment?
Oh, yeah.
Who could have just given up,
Mm.
blamed his circumstances?
Right.
But he chose to see it as this turning point.
He realized he had the power to create a different future for himself. He wasn't just stuck with whatever life threw his way.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of personal responsibility, right? It puts you back in the driver's seat.
It gives you your power back. Instead of feeling like you're at the mercy of your circumstances, you get to say, okay, maybe my life isn't perfect, but I'm in charge of how I respond. I get to choose how I grow from here.
It's such a powerful shift in perspective.
It is. It's like that mantra he talks about. If it's to be, it's up to me.
Right. And it's not about becoming superhuman. It's about realizing that we all have that power within us.
So we've explored all these incredible ideas from Bryant Tracy, from that initial wake-up call to the importance of self-esteem to those sneaky dangers of the valley of excuses. But there's this one thought I keep coming back to.
I'm curious, what is it?
So Tracy, he focuses a lot on external areas, right? Politics, the justice system, healthcare places where he sees this lack of personal responsibility playing out. But what about our internal world, our thoughts, our beliefs, our relationships? How does this radical self-responsibility apply there?
That is such a good question. It's like taking that architect metaphor inward. You become not just the architect of your external life, but also the architect of your internal world.
Exactly. Imagine that. What if we stopped blaming our parents, our pasts, our circumstances for our unhappiness and really took ownership of our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions?
Things get really interesting then, because when you embrace that level of responsibility on an internal level, it unlocks this whole new level of freedom. You start to realize you have the power to reshape not just your actions, but also your thoughts, your beliefs, even how you see yourself.
It's not just about achieving external success anymore. It's about cultivating that inner peace, finding self-acceptance, building fulfilling relationships. It's about taking responsibility for the quality of our inner experience.
Exactly. It all comes back to that core idea. You are the architect of your own experience inside and out.
And that's an incredibly powerful realization because it means no matter what challenges we face, we always have the power to choose a different thought, a different response, a different way of being in the world.
And that's where true freedom lies, isn't it? In that space of choice.
I think so. It's like Tracy is handing us these tools, the blueprints, the permission to design a life that's not only successful, but also deeply, truly fulfilling on a personal level.
It's about creating a life that's aligned with who we truly are and what we truly desire.
And it all starts with embracing that one powerful truth. If it's to be, it's up to me.
You are the architect of your own destiny, both inside and out.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into personal responsibility. Keep this question in mind as you go about your day. What will you choose to create with the blueprint of your life?